This is Electric People. What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of Electric People Podcast. And a special shout out today to my door-to-door solicitors, which I think most of you are, but every now and then we get a new friend up in the listenership. So this is a solo episode. We do these every now and then. They're designed to help us think better about leadership or sales concept, or devoted to a specific skill. That's what today is. So today we're talking about prospecting. Prospecting is one of the lost arts of selling. I'm seeing, early on in my career, we used to talk a lot about prospecting. We developed a lot of methods on prospecting. There was a lot of training focused solely on finding better customers and finding more customers and effectively like filling our sales pipeline. Over the years, it's kind of a given. It's the first step in the process. And so a lot of people have stopped giving importance to it. But I believe it is, if not the most important skill in selling, it's definitely the one that you use the most. And it's definitely the one that you spend the most time doing if you're doing the job right, which means that if you make minor improvements in it, it will also yield the most results. So kind of a journey to this episode today. In summary, last year I went back through a lot of kind of like the basics, kind of like the standard works of selling. So on the sales side, I went through The Alchemist. I went through The Psychology of Selling. Psychology of Selling is probably the book I've read the most in my career. On the leadership side, I went through Tribal Leadership. I went through Leadership and Self-Deception. I went through The Anatomy of Peace, and just kind of some like core, like foundational, like sales and leading people type books. And I found that to an expert in their career, if you've been doing this for 5 years or more, if you've led 1,000 accounts or more, when you go back and visit the basics, you find a lot of ideas. It sparks a lot of like fresh concepts, and your brain basically learns things that already knew, but it looks at it in a new way, which is where a lot of innovation comes from. And so the thing that stood out to me most is I was listening to a podcast with Seth Godin. He's one of my favorite like marketing and kind of like business minds. And he was answering a question from somebody that said, what do you do? I can't even remember what the question was, but if you're stuck in business. And his answer, and if you know Seth Godin, you've heard this many times, but he said, you need to get yourself better customers. You just need better clients. And I started thinking about that as it relates to sales. And I started thinking, how many of the problems do I hear, or do you hear as a sales leader, that would go away if the person just had more clients? A lot of times it's a thin pipeline that creates these problems. It's somebody trying to push someone through the pipe that maybe is not all that ready, but it's all they've got. And so they stress about it, they toil about it, their soul's belabored when they lose the account, when really it was likely that it wasn't going to stick in the first place. So when I was going through The Psychology of Selling, this quote stuck out to me. I'll read it to you. It says, your success in sales will be determined by the number of new prospects you talk to every day. Now that's crazy simple, and everybody knows that, but very few people practice it. Your success in sales will be determined by the number of new prospects you talk to every day. So if you're listening to this and you're a vet and you're a very skilled closer, or you know how to present in the home really well, you're really good at objections, none of that will matter as much as the number of new prospects that you talk to every day. How many qualified people that could buy from you are you getting in front of that are new, original, fresh entrants into your pipeline every single day? So again, this is releasing right after daylight savings. So it is literally the time when prospecting opportunity is the highest. This is the time when we should see an increase in our sales. We have more people home. They're approachable a lot longer because the light somehow makes people feel like even though it's the same hour of the day, it's not as late. So our opportunity to earn, our opportunity for fresh relationships, it's literally spring. It's the time for that. We should set a goal to improve and increase our prospecting. So I want you to think about how much of your time is spent getting in front of new customers every single day. If you're an alarm rep, if you're a solar rep, if you're a pest control rep, we live here by the minimum of a 4x5. 4x5 means 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, only spent on focused prospecting. That's a minimum. Now I'll just run through real quick the numbers of at least the business that I experienced when I was selling full-time in solar. A little bit different in alarms, but not too much different. So in general, if you're prospecting in the light quarters, so that would be, you get into the neighborhood by 2, you try to stay productive until about 8:30. So the hours from 2 to 6 would be spent prospecting and finding fresh leads. So if you look at that window of time, you get there and from 2 to 4, odds of finding a new customer are relatively low. It's still more productive than not working, of course, but you're talking to people that are generally home during the day. You're talking to people that have heard it before. You're not catching the person that's always at work, so hasn't heard the pitch or hasn't heard the pitch as many times. So it's a great time to get your mind and your mouth moving. It's a great time to practice. It's a great time to pick up some of those like low percentage sales that you'll pick up a couple of times a week. So again, you got your fish in the line, you got your line in the water. You might catch a big fish every now and then, but you're certainly going to catch more than if your line's not in the water. But once you've connected with people, once you've worked it out, once your like sales evolutionary machine is going, and then it hits 5 to like 6:30, those are the prime prospecting hours. If you are going to get a new sale, it will likely come between those hours statistically. So again, if your success is determined by the amount of new prospects you get in front of every day, it's simply a question of making sure that you're getting those 20 minimum hours of focused prospecting. So let's talk about focused prospecting for just a second. It doesn't mean that there's a big difference between focused prospecting and time in hood, or like time in uniform is what I'll call it. A lot of people have their uniform on all day and they're actually like away from their home and they're actually like often even in the neighborhood, but they're not actively prospecting. The best prospectors I know and the most productive salespeople, they kind of gamify it and they set up these little rules. Like they don't have social media on their phone. They may have it on an iPad that they use at home, or, they may use a browser, but they don't have an instant response for when their lizard brain says, oh, I wonder if that item is on sale, or I wonder if that person commented back. It's off of their phone. It's laborious to get into it and check it, so they just don't do it. They'll set do not disturb mode on their phone so that for 4 hours, the sole question on their mind is who is the most likely person that can benefit from this offer. And so if you're spending 4 hours of concentrated prospecting time, you can probably get in about 10 pitches. 10 pitches, a pitch being you actually get the deal out to a person. So if you knock the door, the person opens it and slams it in your face immediately, doesn't count as a pitch. If you can actually get out the promotion and what's in it for the customer and what's in it for the company, then generally you would count that as a pitch. It takes about 4 hours of conscious productive prospecting to create an account. So if you're creating 5 accounts a week, you're needing about 20 hours of prospecting. So if you look at today's market and what people actually convert from the coldest of cold sales to an install, you're probably going to install about 1 in every 3 people that you create an account on. An account's just a proposal. It's basically like, hey, this might work. I'm going to create a design. I'll come show it to you. It may work. It may not. So you're about 1 in 3. So again, if you want to be installing 1 to 2 a week, which is more than possible in this job, that's 10 to 15 installs in a quarter, you need the time. So to my friends that are frustrated with their sales career, especially sales career in solar right now, the very first thing I would have you do is start tracking your productive knocking hours. Nowadays, there's apps that can do this for you, or just start a timer and add it up at the end of the week. What you will likely find is it's not that you're bad at the job, you're simply not giving yourself enough time. Now, if you're really ambitious and want to maximize this opportunity, 6 days a week, 4 hours a day minimum of finding new customers, no matter how full your pipe is. If you do that, generally 2 things will happen. Number 1, you'll be in market and you'll stumble upon a deal every now and then. The timing's right for somebody. Somebody didn't follow back up. You have a new product or service or a new angle on the same product that now works for the customer. The customer's out of a situation that they were in before. Maybe they got a new roof. Maybe they were taking care of someone that lived in the house and that person's no longer there and they're able to like focus on this. Maybe, they have a friend that had a good experience with your product, whatever. The market refreshes and resets about every 6 months. So you'll find deals if you're in the neighborhood. What also happens is you get better at the thing that you do the most. So if you're iterating and focusing and practicing and actually like noticing what goes well and changing, you get really good at prospecting. So your time is more impactful. It's more valuable. So just spending the time working on the thing will increase your odds of getting a sale even if you don't improve your skills. But focused time on anything will improve your skills. Humans are evolutionary beings. You will get better at it. So the best thing that you can do for your job, especially if you're new, is track, gamify, and hold yourself to that 4x5. I would challenge you to do at least 4x6. The very best, do more than that. So I remember when I first got into the industry, I had the opportunity to go knock with John Sanders. John Sanders has almost 2,000 personal self-generated installs in the space. And it was really interesting because when I met him, 13 years ago, he was introduced as the top rep, the best seller. He still has more installs than anybody else. But when I met him in a neighborhood, and I met him in the neighborhood at 10:30. Now, I had just transitioned from a career in alarms. I didn't know all the ins and outs of solar. I didn't know all the strategy. And the first thing I asked him was, do you always come out here at 10:30? And he says, well, most guys start at 1 or 2. It just takes me longer and I have to get 2 a day. It takes me longer than everybody else, so I get out here early. And it was so matter of fact. It wasn't actually true. He actually is a really good seller, but it was so matter of fact that John always had a full pipe. He was always the number 1 or number 2 installer. And it's because he was just simple about his prospecting. He gave himself enough time. So again, kind of to further emphasize the point, quote number 2, Jeb Blount, Fanatical Prospecting, the number one reason for failure in sales is an empty pipeline. There's a couple reasons for that. One, it's like totally obvious. Generally, if you're not doing well in sales, it's not because you're not good at selling. It's because you don't have enough clients. Not everybody buys. And, in hanging out with John that day and knowing him for the past years, I know that John has had more cancels than most people have even attempts. He has had more customer signatures signed and not go to the roof than most people's fist ever touches a door. That's the game. And so nobody ever quits in sales because, I just wasn't quite good enough at this part of it. Generally, the reason they didn't get that good at that part of it, or probably more likely, is they just didn't have enough at-bats. They didn't have enough clients in the pipeline. So if you're thinking maybe sales isn't for me, or maybe this is harder than I thought, or maybe it's not going to work out, again, I would do the numbers. Think of how many jobs you want to install in a quarter and then work it backwards. And then I would go to your pitch count, right? Again, it takes, if you're a novice at this job, once you get better, you can do it in fewer pitches, but it takes about 10 pitches to create an account, about 3 accounts to get an install. Now, again, that's a novice. You can get much, much better at it, but that means you need to talk to 30 people in order to get an install. Most people don't talk to 30 people in a week. You don't suck. You're just probably not giving yourself enough time. So the best way to kind of like hack the mood and increase your confidence is to reconfigure the bar that gives you confidence. Instead of saying, I want to have a certain amount of installs, just set your focus on the thing that you can control. You can control how many people you talk to in a week. If you set your target to pitch 30 people, you'll be surprised because eventually it will not take you 30 pitches to get an install. And likely what you'll find is you're only pitching 12. You don't suck. You just don't have enough prospects. So again, that's Jeb Blount, Brian Tracy, a lot of like the friends, myself. It's all been confirmed multiple times that is the secret to selling. Now, let me take you through why that works. It's not just motivational. There actually is science to it. So they've done studies of how many buying impressions it takes before somebody makes a buying decision. So we might think that we bought something on a whim. We might think that we, always wanted something, and so we went out and got it. If you analyze at all any buying decision that you've made, you will likely find behind that buying decision 6 to 8 impressions. An impression can be anything. It could be a commercial. It could be a friend, say it's a car. It could be, an ad on the Super Bowl. It could be a pop-up on your YouTube. It could be a friend that had one. It could be your neighbor that got one. You could, hear somebody talking about it. You can see an athlete get endorsed by this particular company. You didn't just wake up one day and blindly purchase something you saw for the first time. In general, it's 6 to 8 buying impressions. People in neighborhoods are exactly the same way. So here's a way that you can use prospecting and even some of your no's to increase your odds of success in selling. So we know that it takes 6 to 8 impressions before someone makes a buying decision. If you're in the solar space, or actually pretty much any home goods services, it's very likely that you're not impression number one. The industry and the product is more mature than that cycle. And so, but it is likely that you are, kind of on the early end of it. So to illustrate, if you're the best salesperson in the world, but you're impression number one, you're probably not getting that person to install. It takes more time than that. If you're a complete novice or don't take it seriously at all, and you happen to find yourself lucky as impression number 6 or 7 or 8 on a doorstep, you can sell it even with poor skills. That's why the time and effort yields to sales. But think about this. Say you do knock somebody's door and they're a rare 2. They've basically heard a poor pitch from a previous salesperson, and that's it. And then a couple months later, you knock the door and you give impression number 2. And they say effectively, no, I'm not interested, and you can't get around it. And you end up leaving. Now, what you'll want to do is you'll want to never get a no if you can help it. So instead of saying, okay, well, thanks, have a good day, maybe you say, you know what, thanks. I'm kind of in the early phase of this promotion. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, for the next quarter, the next 3 or 4 months, I have to respond to the people that, I've targeted here in my territory. I'm going to go talk to them, make them aware. And then after I get, collectively as a group, after we do 100 or so of these, is what an average team will do in a couple months, I'll stop back by and I'll give you a list and point to the people that I've done it, whatever. So then you leave, your impression number 2. Well, if you just consistently go to work, say you met this person at 3 o'clock and they were home, it's likely if you met them at 3 o'clock at their home that they're home every day at 3 o'clock, likely. So if you're working in that same territory and they happen to be pulling out of their driveway and you had a decent conversation with them and you give them a wave, well, that's impression number 3. If you set up a customer across the street and, that customer moves to install, well, maybe they look out their window as we're installing for that entire day and they see somebody getting solar. That's impression number 4. Then they're going to notice other solar panels in the neighborhood, impression number 5. Then they likely will talk to somebody and ask them about it. Oh, you just got solar. I was thinking about doing that. How is it? Do you like it? Do you actually save money? Was it a good experience? Does your roof leak? All of those things. Impression number 6. Maybe they see another install. Maybe they're on the freeway and they see the truck. Whatever it is, you started the process. Your consistency encouraged the process. This customer is getting more and more likely to buy by your mere presence. That's why the worst thing that you can do is knock the door and then switch neighborhoods, because you just planted a 2 seed and then you let it die. If you knock the door, it's a little seed. That seed will water. And if you're really good at follow-up, you'll start to go back and visit these people, and then they're at a 7 or 8. They're highly likely to purchase then if you can have a clear, articulate conversation with them and loop in the social proof of the neighbors and all the work that you've done since. In my selling career, the hundreds of installs that I have, I wish I actually knew this stat, but a very high majority of those did not happen the very first time I met them on the doorstep. They're go backs, or I'll go install them, or I'll talk to them after I install their neighbor, or I'll install 3 or 4 houses around them and I'll go back, or I'll learn that they're friends with somebody that did get installed, and I'll leverage those impressions in order to make it more likely for them to buy. So for your confidence, for your self-esteem, if you're meeting people and thinking in your head, wow, that person was probably a 2, don't beat yourself up if it didn't go well. The very best people have very low odds of selling a 2. What you can do is stay consistent in the neighborhood. Keep working, keep having conversations, keep making connections, keep lining up timelines with people, have a good system for follow-up, and you'll notice you'll start selling more people. That's why the second 6 months of this job are exponentially easier than the first 6 months if you do it right. If you stay in the same neighborhood, if you keep working, if you keep talking to people, that second 6 months, you're talking to people that are a 4 to an 8. In your first 6 months, you're often talking to people that are 1s or 3s. They behave differently. They communicate differently. They're more cold. They're less open. There's less trust. There's less proof. So if you can get past that 6-month mark, you should be on your way to a much more, I wouldn't say completely effortless, but it is a lot less raw, gritty, rejection-based effort to materially increase your sales. So again, everything that is associated with our brand is an impression positive or negative. So stay put. It's the best thing that you can do. Now, one trend that I am seeing that's happening in solar that I'm going to encourage people to distance themselves from. Now, some people aren't going to like this, and that's fine. But this is how I would do it if I were to rebuild a sales pipeline from scratch today, is I would not fall into the lead trap. Is it bad to get leads? No. Is it bad to have people assist on your accounts? Of course not. In fact, in the beginning, it's vital. You should have somebody helping assist and close your accounts. However, if you're relying on it solely, your job is a lot harder, and mathematically, you are likely to get less sales. Here's why. We just talked about, as you stay put in a neighborhood, you increase the impressions that you're getting that are, that you're influencing, and you're essentially building trust and increasing the likelihood of neighbors, even if they told you no a month ago. So if you only purchase leads, or if you only rely on people that are already interested, number one, you're only talking to people that are deep in the pipeline that don't have a relationship, which means they're often price shopping. So what happens is, if they've signed up for a lead, we purchase a lot of leads in our company, you're likely not the only one that's getting that lead. And so if there's no relationship, if there's no connection, and all they're doing is putting out kind of like a beacon to see who will give them the best deal, you end up with price shoppers that don't much care about the value of the system. They're generally just looking for the person that will give them the lowest price. This is where Seth Godin would say, you need better clients. Cheap is expensive, right? Oftentimes the company willing to do it for the least amount of money does not have the financial wherewithal to support this customer for 25 years. And so they end up making these painful and expensive mistakes. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. We've seen that over 50% of installed customers industry-wide are orphaned, which means they're installed by a company that's no longer in business. When you look at Sunrun and our backing and the way that we're structured, we're a lot better positioned to take care of that customer and give them good service for 25 years. So again, if you're generally buying leads, that's generally the value that they're looking for. The other problem is you end up getting those across random geographies. And so you never benefit from the social proof that you can build in a neighborhood. You essentially go from I don't want to say cold to deal, because you do have a lead and they're not bad, but I've seen it very commonly where our top sellers don't want leads. We used to distribute leads as a company, and they don't want them because they just drive all over town. The person's price shopping. They can't piggyback off the neighbors. They can't benefit from social proof, and they can't build a sustainable pipeline that builds on itself. And so again, I'm not saying it's bad. I actually think a great salesperson should leverage all kinds of prospecting. Just don't cancel out the raw prospecting that you can go out and build. When you create your own customer, you set the tone for that relationship. You guarantee that the proper framing was given to the deal. You can set up how you're going to close it. You can size it properly. You can find their hot buttons. You can effectively build a system for the customer. You can establish a relationship of trust early on. And you can set the tone so that the close of your sale is more likely to happen. You can set it up so that you're more likely to get referrals. If some unskilled person, you're relying on them for 100% of your volume, it's not bad. You're just leaving some meat on the bone. There's a lot that you can do if you're willing to generate your own leads. And I think you'll find after a time, especially after that 6-month window, a lot of people prefer it. Again, no dog in the fight. We install solar, so however people get it is fine. But as a career salesperson, I want our salespeople to benefit as much as they can from the opportunity. So if you're new, figure out prospecting first. And of course, set deals for somebody that can close it. You don't want to lose those customers. And while you're learning the business, it can be complex. But expand your skills. We want everybody to come in and learn and grow and learn the industry so that they can be self-sufficient and create their own leads. If you're primarily closing right now, I would encourage you to open your aperture, because there are more deals that you can have access to. And what I want everybody to participate in as much abundance that the industry can offer. So just don't fall into the trap. Make sure that your prospecting skills stay sharp enough so that you can always maximize your opportunity. Again, what we're looking for is the highest rate of closing the most customers as possible and full pipes. The final thing that maybe I'll close with is the job is a lot more enjoyable if you have quality relationships that you're working on. It's really nice to have at least one or two people in a day that are expecting you. So again, as you're starting out, expect a lot of learning, expect a lot of rejection, expect a lot of prospecting. It's going to be a really big part of your life. So double down on it. Give yourself enough time to fill the pipe. After you've been doing it for a while, keep that 4 hours of prospecting. It gets a lot easier. It gets a lot more enjoyable, especially if you stay put in a neighborhood. What we're looking for is really high roof count. After that 6 months, or even maybe it doesn't take you a full 6 months, what the ideal is that you'll have 4 hours of prospecting and then 1 or 2 appointments. Whether those appointments are referrals, follow-ups, closes, it's a really good balance to your day. You get in there, you do the hard work, you prospect, you search for new customers, you fill your pipe, you make sure that you have enough to sustain your business going forward. And then for at least 2 hours a day, you nurture those leads, you follow up with people, you close accounts, you connect people, you help overcome concerns. And if you can do that, you can have a very, very good career. What I often see is people are really spotty. They'll do a couple hours here and there, or they'll jump neighborhoods a lot. And so they never benefit from the momentum of their previous work. The goal is to get to a point where you have regular sustainable business, your skills are improving, the job can be enjoyable, and it can also be very prosperous and you can earn very well. Let me close with a story. This is something that I personally experienced as it relates to prospecting. So I did most of my personal volume in Ventura, California. I was up on the hill in this one neighborhood. There's about 220 homes in the neighborhood. And I did everything short of moving into that neighborhood. In fact, I actually did consider, when I lived up there, I had a realtor who was he was one of my customers, and I was looking for homes in that area. That's how much I I felt like I belonged in that community. But of those 220 homes, I installed almost 70 of them. Now that might not sound like a lot, but if you're there, you think about it, right? Some of the homes rent, some of them don't qualify, some of them you can never get a hold of. And it felt like every other home pretty much. And then there was clusters of 5 or 6, all had solar. If you got solar in that neighborhood, you got it from me. In prospecting, I learned everything. I learned the HOA. I learned, how the HOA presidency worked. I knew the school district. I knew what kids played on what teams together. I knew which parents liked each other. I was aware of the cliques and the groups. I knew who knew who. I knew what portion of the neighborhood was built at what time. I knew some of I knew that they had a builder that came in first that wasn't as good. They swapped out that builder with the second one. So the first edition homes, they had some things that needed improvements. I knew about the ground settling issues, all of these things. So when I walked through and I talked to people, I was the neighborhood solar guy for that area. I knew everybody, and people would tell me every single day, wow, you know more people in this neighborhood than I do. And I would reply, yeah, I've sat in just about every living room in the neighborhood, and everybody that qualifies, I've basically done this for, or everyone that qualifies and will have a conversation with me. And so I got to a point where literally it was every second or third home and a bunch of clusters of homes I had personally sold and installed. Then there was this little ravine that separated the next neighborhood over. And that neighborhood over was probably only 150 yards. It was very, very close. I stayed in this first neighborhood for so long, you could not pry me out of that neighborhood. I was very confident that I was going to get a sale every single day I was there. I had very high conversion because there was so much social proof. I just wanted to stay as long as I could. What I should have started doing is, as my roof count and my prospects were dwindling, I should have started teeing up this other territory. Instead, I kind of cold turkeyed it. I finished every single job I could do in that neighborhood, and then I switched over to the other neighborhood. And it was hard. The things that I had learned even 200 yards over did not apply. It was a different HOA. It was a different builder. The homes were about 30 years older. They didn't know the people across the ravine. And so I had to relearn kind of all the tricks. And I did, I spent the time, but anytime you switch neighborhoods, you have to put that time in again. So even that next few months was a bit of a challenge as I built up the pipe. Now I could speak with confidence. I still knew the area, but I remember how good it felt to fully nurture an area and how beneficial that was for my sales career. So what I want you to do is we go into this new time. It's a new time and it's a new season. It's daylight savings time. I want us to evaluate our prospecting. Again, prospecting is something that you should look forward to doing. We should spend 80% of our time prospecting. If you spend 80% of your time prospecting, it's a very forgiving situation to be in. You can mess up accounts, and guess what? There's more in the pipe. When I was selling full time, I had a personal goal to always have 10 permits sitting at the city processing for install. And so if I lost an account, was that frustrating? Sure, I don't like losing accounts. Did I lose any kind of sleep over it? No, because I had 9 more. And that was the goal. So sometimes I had less, but very, very often I had more. I could lose 5 or 6 permits, and I would still have 5 or 6 installs to get. And so it's a very comfortable way to go about selling. I could effectively play loose, as I call it, which means I wasn't desperate for the sale. I wanted it, and I was professional, and I was always going to try to do a really good job. But if for some reason it didn't go through, that's fine. Like, I wish it did, but I have others. If you have 1 permit at the city or 2 permits at the city, you engage in behavior that makes you less likely to install because you need the account too much. People can feel your attachment to it. It starts to get a little weird. They might subconsciously be thinking, why are you pushing this so hard? And if you need that 1 install for your rent and you have a family and you're trying to provide, that's a very tough situation to be in. The way out of it is prospecting. Get yourself better clients. The way you get yourself better clients is you spend more time on focused prospecting. So real quick, as kind of a wrap up, I want you to evaluate and start tracking your prospecting. Track how many hours a day you prospect. The target is 4. In addition, I want you to track how many pitches you give in a day. The target is 10. And as you get better at selling, it's hard to get 10 pitches in. You'll start to have good conversations. You'll get into a house, you'll sell 1 or 2, and you won't need a full 10. But if you shoot for 10, even if you go out and you spend 5 hours prospecting, you give 10 pitches and you don't get an account. You can only do that for so long before you do find a customer. The deal is good enough that you will find somebody. And you're an evolutionary human being, so you will get better at it, even if you're not consciously focused on it. Now imagine if you're also reading sales and prospecting books and talking to other people that are good at prospecting and you're honing your skills. This job, 80% of it is science, not art. Let's focus on increasing the prospecting, and I'm excited to hear the stories of you guys that do it and see success from it. So hopefully it's helpful. And again, tune in next time for another episode of Electric People. I'm not sure what topic we're going to handle then, but hopefully it's valuable to you guys, and happy prospecting. If you like what you hear and are interested in joining the team, DM us on Instagram at RunXStreet.
What are you waiting for? Shoot us a DM and let's get going.